and by the way, is a Vietnam hero for his combat activities there, and was a Republican senator from Nebraska. The minority leader himself is threatening to block President Obama's nominee for Secretary of Labor, and he said so. Secretary of Labor is a good person. Mr. President, he put himself through school working as a garbage man. His parents are immigrants. Republicans on the no, Mr. President, what we have done here for generations of the Senate is we have hearings on these nominees, and that's the way it should be. And there in recent years have been, after the hearings have taken place, a senator will say, I have a few more questions. We'll send them. And it was hand 2 or 3, 4 or 5 questions. With Secretary Geithner, who has recently resigned as Secretary of Treasury, he got 28 questions. But, Mr. President, no, I'm going to finish my statement. Mr. President, we understand that now what has happened in these committees is that they ask all the questions they want in the committee. That's not good enough for them. 28 questions, not enough. For example, on Gina McCarthy, who wants to be head of the President has asked that she be his Director of Environment and Public Works, the EPA, I'm sorry. More than 1,100 questions were submitted to her after the hearing. Jack Lew, who has had basically many jobs in government, he had a full hearing. They gave him more than 700 questions to answer. This has gotten way out of hand. Anything that they can do to slow things down, that's what they do. Executive and judicial nominees who are ready to be confirmed by the Senate have been pending an average of 200 days, more than 6 months. Now, Mr. President, listen to that. Executive and judicial nominees who are ready to be confirmed by the Senate have been pending an average of 200 days. That's more than 6 months. The confirmation process has moved at glacial pace because of extraordinary Republican obstruction. Cloture has been filed on 58 of President Obama's nominees. 58. By this point in President Bush's term, cloture had been filed on a handful of nominees. But Republicans are not blocking these nominations because they object to the qualifications of nominees. We passed in this body something called Dodd-Frank. It was an answer to what was going on in Wall Street, the collapse of Wall Street. Richard Cordray, the nominee to lead the Consumer Finance Bureau, which is part of that bill that's now law, is a perfect example. He was nominated by the President of the United States almost 2 years ago, 23 months ago. Republicans aren't concerned about his ability to do the job. They're afraid, I guess, he'd do his job too well. He's extremely well qualified. If anything, they're concerned he might, as I said, actually do the job, protecting consumers from the kind of corporate greed that collapsed the financial markets in the first place. If he received an up or down vote here today, he'd be approved in a millisecond, however long it takes to call the roll. A couple of other examples. We talked yesterday about the D.C. Circuit. By statute, the D.C. Circuit, some say the most important court in America, more important than the Supreme Court, has 11 spots. Justice Roberts went to the Supreme Court in 2005. His spot has not been filled yet. We've tried, been 2 filibusters stopping them. We have 4 vacancies there. President Obama is the first president in more than 50 years who's not had an appointment confirmed at the D.C. Circuit. But it's not because we haven't tried. For example, Caitlin Halligan, tried to get her for 4 years, filibustered twice. The seat she nominated, I repeat, was the seat that was vacated by Justice Roberts in 2005. 2005. Today it's 2013. Do the math. And now Republicans have forced a cloture on this nomination, even though Srinivasan was nominated by the D.C. Circuit a year ago. But even though it was reported out of the committee unanimously, no, we're going to stall. We're not going to have a vote on it. The nominee has wide bipartisan support. it appears from both sides of the aisle. If it was reported out of the committee unanimously, I would assume that's the case. But neither stellar qualifications nor bipartisan support is enough to prevent Republican obstruction. According to a report released this month by the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service, first-term judicial nominees reported out of committee unanimously have waited 9 times longer to be confirmed than under President Bush. President Obama's first-term district court nominees have waited 5 times longer than those previously. And first-term circuit court nominees have waited more than 7 times longer. Yesterday, this Republican leader raised the example of Wyoming judges' proof they're willing to support our nominees. Wyoming, as I indicated yesterday, there may be a more Republican state in the Union. I don't know where it is. I said, well, let's do him yesterday. Let's do him Wednesday. The Republican leader said no. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure why we have a judicial vacancy crisis in this country. We can talk about all the, well, we've cleared most of the calendar. I take the Senate's charge to advise and consent very seriously. But Republicans have corrupted the founders' intent, blocking qualified nominees for the slightest reason, if no reason. President Obama deserves to choose his team, just like Davy Johnson deserves to choose his team. I believe any president deserves his or her team. But Republicans have again and again delayed or obstructed the president's nominees. This Republican obstruction has created an unreasonable and unworkable standard where minor issues are raised as excuses to block major nominees or to require a 60-vote supermajority for confirmation. Before the Republican leader accuses me, Mr. President, of going back to my word, he should take a long look in the mirror. And he should spend some time in honest reflection of Republicans' own contributions to the gridlock threatening this storied institution before he claims that, quote, there's no real problem here.
Mr. President,
Republican leader.
According to the Congressional Research Service, President Obama's had his cabinet nominees confirmed quicker than his predecessors during the same period, the second term. Quicker. I don't know what the majority leader thinks advise and consent means. Listening to him, it means sit down, shut up, don't ask any questions, and confirm immediately. I don't think that's what the Founding Fathers had in mind. Talk about manufacturing a problem. Secretary of Energy, 97-0. Secretary of Interior, 87-11. Secretary of the Treasury, 71-26. Office of Management and Budget, 96-0. Secretary of State, 94-3 in just 7 days. 7 days. What we've just heard here, I'm afraid, from my good friend the Majority Leader, in spite of the baseball analogy, is that, and I read in the papers this morning, he's been meeting with his members, trying to get 51 votes to blow the Senate up. Now, we've got important issues coming down the pike. We want to finish the Farm Bill. We've been working hard to develop a broad bipartisan support for an immigration bill. We know what's going on here. What I fear is the Majority Leader is working his way toward breaking his word to the Senate and to the American people and blowing up this institution and making it extremely difficult for us to operate on the collegial basis that we've operated on.
The Majority Leader.
Is unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated?
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider these nominations. Counter number 93, 94, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, with the exception of Colonel John J. Heck. 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, 131, 132, 133, 134, 135, 136, 137, 138, 139, and 140. And all nominations of the Secretary's desk in the Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, and Navy. That the nominations be confirmed en bloc. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and no further motion to be in order to any of the nominations. That any related statements be printed in the record. That President Obama be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent. Senate proceed to executive session and consider calendars numbered 11 and 12, that the Senate proceed to vote on the nominations order listed with no intervening action or debate. The motion reconsider be made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, that no further motion be in order to the nominations. Any statements related to the nominations be printed in the record. The President Obama be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection, the clerk will report the nominations.
Nominations: the Judiciary, Mark A. Barnett of Virginia to be a judge of the United States Court of International Trade. Claire R. Kelly of New York to be a judge of the United States Court of International Trade.
If there's no further debate on the nomination, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is agreed to.
I ask unanimous consent.
If there's no further debate on the Kelly nomination, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-Res 129.
The clerk
We
will
now
report.
proceed to that matter.
Senate Resolution 129, recognizing the significance of May 2013 as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and so forth.
Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent that a resolution be agreed to, that a Hirano amendment to the preamble, which is at the desk, be agreed to, the preamble as amended be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S-Res 158.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 158 to authorize the production of records by the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations of the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to S-Con-Res 17.
The clerk will report.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 17, providing for a conditional adjournment or recess of the Senate and an adjournment of the House of Representatives.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the concurrent resolution be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'm told there are two bills at the desk. If that's the case, I ask for their first reading.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills for the first time.
H.R. 3, an act to approve the construction, operation, and maintenance of the Keystone XL pipeline and for other purposes. H.R. 271, an act to clarify the compliance with an emergency order and so forth and for other purposes.
I now ask for second reading but object to my own request on block.
Objection having been heard, the bills will be read for a second time on the next legislative day.
I ask unanimous consent the appointment at the desk appears separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that on Friday, May 24th through Monday, June 3rd, Senators Levin and Rockefeller be authorized to sign duly enrolled bills or joint resolutions.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the Senate's recess, committees be authorized to report legislative and executive matters on Tuesday, May 28th from 10 a.m. to noon.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding the upcoming recess or adjournment of the Senate, the President of the Senate, the President pro tempore of the Senate, majority and minority leaders be authorized to make appointments to commissions, committees, boards, conferences, or interparliamentary conferences authorized by law by concurrent action of the two houses or by order of the Senate.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day, to adjourn and convene for pro forma sessions only. Consent the Senate, when the Senate completes its business day, to adjourn and convene pro forma sessions only, with no business conducted on the following dates and times. That following each pro forma session, the Senate adjourn until the next pro forma session. Friday, May 24th, 12:30 p.m. Tuesday, May 28th, 12 p.m. Friday, May 31st, 12 p.m. And the Senate adjourn on Friday, May 31st until 2 p.m. on Monday, June 3rd, unless the Senate receives a message from the House that it has adopted S-Con Res 17, the adjournment resolution. And if the Senate receives such a message, the Senate adjourn from 2 p.m. on adjourn until 2 p.m. on Monday, June 3rd, 2013. Then on Monday, following the prayer and the pledge, the morning hour will be deemed expired. General proceedings be approved to date. Time for the two leaders will be reserved for the use later in the day. And the following any leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business on 4 p.m. Senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. The following morning business, Senate resume consideration of the Farm Bill, S-954.
Action.
Mr. President, Senator Stabenow and Cochran have arranged two votes. It will begin Monday, June 3rd at 5:30. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands adjourned until 12:30 p.m. on Friday, unless the Senate receives a message from the House that it has passed S-Con Res 17, and the Senate stands adjourned pursuant to the terms of S-Con Res 17.
The Senate today has been working on amendments to the Farm Bill, approving ones on investigating crop insurance fraud and voting to reduce crop insurance subsidies for top-earning farmers. They also rejected an amendment to end federal subsidies for tobacco growers. The Senate also voted to confirm President Obama's choice to serve as judge on the appeals court for the District of Columbia, Srikanth. Next week, the Senate will be on a week-long recess for a district work period for Memorial Day. We'll have live coverage when the Senate returns here on C-SPAN 2. There was a discussion on the Senate floor today over sending the Senate's 2014 budget plan